Welcome to another episode. This is Augusto Pinad from Productivity Voice and Nosby Consulting.
And this is Art Gelwicks from Gelwicks Tech, and we're going to be talking about how to start a new project today. So a little difference in our normal format is we're going to start taking common productivity questions, and we're going to answer them the way we would answer them. So you can see both of our approaches based on our way too many number of decades of experience in these fields. Yes, we're both old.
There was a change that came out of the feedback, and people is okay, get more into. I understand you guys understand the technology, understand the productivity, but can you get more into what you do and how you do it? And that was part of the idea of make this change, start going to the basic problems that seems basic, but they're always there. And how do you do things like today? How do you start a project, and how we as a consultant, as a coaches, will approach that? In my particular case, I do two things. I have Productivity Voice. Productivity Voice is a coaching practice, and we talk about technology, we talk about iPad, but it's really more on the personal side of the productivity. And there is Nosby.consulting, where I work with small businesses that use Nosby as part of their productivity set of tools, and how not only to work from that business owner or business owners, but also how to teach your team how to work into those things. Because one of the things is when you talk about personal productivity, it's about what works for me. But as a small business owners, one of the things that is interesting is how can I teach, show, and get to show my team how this will help them to improve, to lead a better life, etc.
It's interesting because for me, getting projects started is two aspects. One, for clients, I mean, I've been doing this for 30 plus years, so getting new projects off the ground and running successfully is part of the bread and butter of the business. But also my own projects, because I have Gelwicks Tech, because I also do a couple of clothing lines for Check Your Brother and a new one I just started around cryptids and Bigfoot and things like that, just because I think he's cool looking. Those types of things, the writing on beingproductive.me, these are all projects that are various sizes and scale. And applying the wisdom that has been applied to clients for so many times, applying those to my own projects is just as important, if not more so. And I think a lot of people struggle with this because they will get into this space of there has to be this defined methodology right away. I have to follow this published methodology of starting projects so that they will be successful. And they fail to recognize that the start of a project is its most, I want to say its most delicate time. If you're a fan of the movie Dune, they talk about that a little bit. A beginning is a delicate, I'm going to get the quote wrong, but you can look up the quote. So when we think about starting a project, somebody comes to you, Augusto, and they say, hey, I have an idea for a project. I have an idea. Let's even just go with that, because that's usually the formation of all projects. What's your first reaction? What's the first things that your brain goes to put in motion?
We have an idea. We have something that we want to accomplish. The first thing is, did you have a team who is going to help you with this? Or this is something that you are going to do on your own? And that makes a huge difference, because this is a project that I'm going to do on my own. I can make different mistakes. I can make even more mistakes in the process, and it's fine. It's just me. When now I'm bringing the team, it's not that you're not going to make those mistakes or you cannot make those mistakes, but you need to have a much clearer idea of where you are going. Ideally, you will do the same process with a team or without a team, but that's ideal. That's not how it happened. Sometimes when it's our project, we can skip certain areas on the thinking process where we have the expertise. And we know if worst goes to worst, we will be able to fix it. That doesn't work as well when you are working now in a team environment or even in the office, and it's one of the things that we see when we both do a lot of or have done a lot of IT implementations over the years. And we see basic things that fail on those implementations because the people who were doing the project or planning the project or organizing the project knew how to fix it, and they took it from that personal side. Well, okay, fine. If that failed, we know how to fix it. So they never consider what will happen if that failed. Again, when you are working on these size projects or a larger size project, the problem is not if you can fix it, is how many people are you going to impact if something goes wrong. We do a migration of a server. Can you know how to do it? Yes. But if you don't know what is the impact that can happen, it could be big. If you're just upgrading your Windows machine or your iPad, and it's just your iPad and it failed and there is an issue, well, you are affected, but it's not the end of the world. And that is something important to consider when you are going to start with this project. The second thing is what language the people in the project talk. And I'm not talking about English, Spanish, or French. I'm talking about what is the people that is going to be involved. Because when you have in a project, the tech people and the management people and the accounting people, you need to find what is the common language between them, because otherwise you are going to be crashing against each other in many cases for exactly in agreement. It's just you define it, you use different words that seems to be in contradiction because you don't communicate well with the other person.
There's an overlap between a lot of the things that you're talking about and a lot of the things that I do. I have 4 basic questions I ask right away, especially if it's an outside. For an inside project, it's a little bit different, but for an outside project, the first question I actually ask is, why are we doing this project? Why is this project important enough for you to dedicate time, resources, and money to? And I ask that specifically not for justification, but for clarification. Because if they can explain that to me in a way that they believe, and you can kind of see it in their eyes when they talk to you, if they get it and they have conviction and an understanding as to the work that this is going to require, maybe not the scope and scale, but just that it's going to require work, that's already closer to getting the project going. The second is who's going to be involved. The who question is an often difficult one because so many people will think about their immediate team and they don't think about the larger group that becomes drawn into a project. Even if it's a small project, maybe you're updating some documentation, maybe you're going through and revising some data sets or clearing out some old data. You may think that only 2 or 3 people are involved in it, but I can guarantee it's going to touch and interact with more people than just that. Understanding that who can really make a difference, because if you figure out that one of those who people are not going to be able to participate effectively, that could derail your entire project before you ever get started. The third one is when. When does this actually need to be done, and when does it need to be started? I'm a big one for reverse scheduling. I love reverse scheduling. I'm an old waterfall guy, so I love laying out task management plans and creating the relationships based on when it needs to be finished, and then working it backwards and figuring out that, yes, you should have started this 4 months ago, and being able to illustrate that fact. Because so often the immediate reaction is to crash the plan, push things forward, and underestimate things like the discovery period, which winds up derailing everything right away. So knowing the when is really critical. And the fourth one, which I think is probably the most important for long term, is success criteria. What is the definition of success for this project? Not what are the goals, not what are the objectives. That's a whole different conversation. But a year after this project is finished, what is it about it that you, managers, stakeholders, whomever, will be looking at this project and say, yes, that was a success? If you have that understanding up front and it jives with why you're doing it and who's involved and when it needs to execute, now at least you know that there's a project that has the potential of reaching that success criteria. And I'll give you a perfect case study for this. I worked for a consulting company for a number of years. They were engaged with a large financial services company who decided they wanted to eliminate their help desk. Big company. They wanted to get rid of their help desk, and they wanted to use basically a chatbot to handle the majority of their incoming. So they put a metric on their project that said their success is 0 calls into the help desk. Immediately, as soon as I got onto this project, unfortunately, it was in mid-flight, but when I got onto this project and I looked at this, I immediately raised my hand and said, you can't reach that success criteria. That is unachievable. The only way to accomplish that is by turning the phone number off. And it's not a technology issue. It's a people issue. There will still be people within your organization who want to pick up a phone and talk to somebody. So you've created a project definition before even discovery that will be a failure. Do you want to proceed with this? Now, again, unfortunately, at that point, it was already in motion. Money had been spent and resources had been allocated. But if that simple line item had been addressed, it could have saved, in this case, millions of wasted dollars.
But let me interrupt you there, because I, like you, have cases where the definition was on the lines of what you're saying, or unattainable or poorly designed, and in mid-flight, then let's adjust it. In David Allen used to say, a renegotiated agreement is not a broken one. And I believe that. And I believe that in the work environment, I believe that on the personal environment, as I have give examples in this podcast and others, with my kids, we put any agreement in writing. Why? Because there is no discussion. Okay. It's in writing. It's in writing since they were very, very little, even before they could read it back. Okay. Now they can. But even it happened last week. My son approached me because in his mind something was happening that was unfair, and I called him and said, fine, bring your phone. Let's open the place where we have captured all these rules. Okay. And his complaint was that I was turning the internet in his devices too early. And when we pulled the rule, we discover that the tyrant in this story was turning the internet an hour and a half later than what the rule said. So I basically look at him and say, well, what do you want to do? Do you want me to continue doing what I'm doing outside of the rule, or you want me to stick to the rule? And obviously his decision was, let's ignore the rule and walk away. But the same thing happened at work. What are the rules? We talk about security, and security and cybersecurity is very, very important. But it's very, very important to the point where your people is being taught. Okay, I've been in office, I'm sure you have too, okay, where when you ask for the password, I have seen people lift the laptop, okay, and have all their passwords in a sticky note under the laptop. Well, when that is the case, all your measurements of cybersecurity are completely useless. They don't work. I have seen now, especially now more modern, okay, the use of the authenticator. That is great, except that what most organizations don't think is the authenticator measurement, the double check, the two-form authentication goes to the personal phone of somebody. So now you are expecting that that person will take good care of their personal stuff because you cannot control it.
Right.
So
that is definitely a downside. Bring your own device.
it is, but it's, I mean, I remember, and I'm going to date me now, okay, when the people carry the RSS cards, okay, the tokens.
Yeah, the RSA keys. Yeah, I had
the
one.
keys are way more secure, to a certain way than this, okay? Because now you can really have a different kind of control. But again, it's where do you want? Oh, well, we need to implement two-form authentication. That's a great project. Except that we, in my experience, what I have seen the most is we implement the tech part of that, and then we fail miserably on the second part. We fail miserably in the teaching the team why. I understand in most companies, people is overworked, people is don't feel that they have time to go, and they see all this corporate learning or company learning as a waste of time. But that's one of the things, with Nosby Consulting, that I try to emphasize to small business owners. You put this system, okay, in the case is Nosby, okay, and sometimes we work with some others, but mostly Nosby. This is great, except that you are trying to get something out of this that your team doesn't understand. Your team doesn't understand what you're trying to do, because you are trying, if you explain it, in most cases they don't, okay, you explain it from your perspective as the business owner, but you're asking people who are looking at the same problem from a completely different perspective to understand your perspective, and that will never happen. You need to come down to that level and then bring them up with you. In a past life, okay, I work a lot with Salesforce implementation. Salesforce is a beast, except that is very poorly implemented on 99% of the places. Why? Because the discovery questions, as you said, are done at the top. That's great. Except nobody takes the time to come down to the people who are doing data entry. Okay, call it salespeople, call it marketing people, call it customer support people. It's irrelevant. Okay, nobody come to that level. Then you are asking these people to check boxes and fill information that they are doing to the minimum extent so they can click next. Okay, that make all that up the hill completely useless. It's useless because of the technology? No, it is useless because we don't get to the other part. One of the things I teach with small business owners is stop thinking about project management. You are, project management, my perspective, okay, work after a certain level when you have 20 layers. Right now, most of the small businesses that I work with, what they need is solution management. It's what is forget about the project. What is what you're trying to solve? You came to this. You don't, when you are less than 50 people, you don't need project management. You need solution management. You need somebody who is trying to solve the problem and explaining and working with the other teams how we are going to solve the problem. But that's really affect what we're discussing today. When you are building this project, what you are building, are you assigning a person who is in charge of make sure that we go moving along that timeline that you were referring, okay, that in most cases don't exist, or you are trying to solve the problem? If you're trying to solve the problem and you have a person in charge of that, you don't need to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because maybe you go 1, 2, and this group of people discover a faster way to go to 5. Because at the end of the day, it's about that solution, not about that project. And the same thing happened in this discussion. What is, as you were saying, what is the goal? What is what we really want? But not only at the level that this problem is designed, how that solution is going to affect the other levels.
Back in the day, one of the jobs I had was titled literally solution architect. And that I always thought was a much more accurate role to what's necessary on so many projects. Being able to go through, and if you think about it from a small business standpoint, being able to go through and look at that success criteria again and say, okay, this is what you want to accomplish, and immediately start to look at what's going to prevent you from accomplishing that. What are the known things that could potentially prevent you from accomplishing that? Sets you up and puts that ball in motion before you start the planning process. Unfortunately, most project methodologies throw you into this discovery exercise, which is undervalued in most cases anyway. But the discovery exercise of trying to gather all the requirements and all the, the stakeholder pieces and everything, and have project charter documents and everything like that. And my argument's always very simple. That's great, but that's down the road. You haven't even gotten to that point yet. Starting with the fact is this a viable idea? Especially as an individual, running my own business, I have to look at every idea as, is it a viable idea? Is it worth spending time and money and research to figure out and execute? Or is it a wasted effort right off the bat? And a lot of ideas are good ideas, but they're not viable ideas. And I always like to think about them like a bag of seeds. You go and you buy a bag of seeds and you're going to plant them in your flower bed, and you're going to you have this vision of having this beautiful flower bed. But is it practical what you're envisioning? Will those plants grow in this area? Do you have the right kind of seeds? Are they old seeds? All of those things that unfortunately sometimes people will look at you and go, oh, you're being a naysayer, you're being negative, you're not thinking about the positive aspects of this, you're not bringing that positive energy to the table. No, I'm not. Because if you're going to kill this thing off now's the time to do it. Not after you've invested 3-4 months into it and 87 meetings and a couple $1,000s worth of just dedicated hardware resource to buy something that nobody knows how to use. And we both know from years of experience that no matter what implementation you're doing, the biggest challenge is when it finally touches the user's hands.
Correct.
And we're going to dig into this in the future quite a bit, the entire concepts around change management and user support and things like that. But that's something you have to think about from the beginning. If your project says that its success is to increase revenue, well, that's wonderful. But it's also not measurable. It's not tactical, and it's not defining, what could go off the rails. The prevention of that goal is far, far larger than its potential success.
Correct. And so when we talk about these things, I remember a client once who came to me and said, well, the dashboards doesn't work. Okay, we start working into why the dashboard doesn't work. Okay. And part of the problem of the definition of the projects is what you as the end user, in this case, this was the business owner, but it was the end user, you are trying to accomplish. When we look into the dashboards, they seem fine. Okay, when we call his IT guy or the guy who was building all these dashboards in Power BI and all this, okay, they were fine. They were doing their job. Okay, and this guy continued, this is not what I want. So at one point, we stopped the conversation and say, what do you want to do? And he looked at me and say, I don't want to carry that PC. All that I want to carry is my phone. We have people here that are incredibly capable. All that I want to do is to have this phone. I don't know how to use that PC. I don't enjoy it. I don't like it. I have a phone. Can you make it everything work on the phone? And that's where that project stopped. Because the project as it was defined was, how can we make our dashboard measurements and everything communication better? Okay. The real project was, I want to get rid of the laptop. Okay. And when we bring his IT to the discussion, the guy was like, well, but everything is built to see on the big screen. I say, that's great. Now let's work into translate it so he can see it on the smallest screen. So he can work into the smallest screen because he's never going to carry that thing. I had another client, he was a real estate person. Okay. And his issue is he wanted to, same thing, I have worked with many people getting rid of their PCs, mostly because they are on the go. They carry the phone is capable. Okay. In this particular case, his issue was, well, one, when I need to show people, and he was an Android user. So we got him into, fine, are you willing to carry a screen? Okay, and we got a very portable small screen, 12 inches, okay, flat. So technically he was carrying the weight, okay, of the laptop, okay, but only put that bag out of the car when he wanted to show something on the large screen to the client. Okay. Other than that, he lived on his phone, and being an Android phone, okay, when he connected, then he get a full desktop experience with all the data. So he carried that and carried a keyboard and a mouse, and he was set. But the project for him was the same. The project for him was not, this is the issue I'm trying to solve. And that's where I'm going back to stop project management and let's do solution management, solution architect, as you said. Okay. The problem, as he see it, is I want to be able to show my phone to the people without carrying the computer. Okay. And part of the issue with this particular realtor is, as a realtor, he was on the go. He never stopped in his office. He never go to that thing. Yeah, in his office, he has a beautiful screen that he could show from the desktop, but that was completely useless. He said, most of the showings I do is when I'm on the house. And that's something we need to remember, and we need to think. And by the way, as you were saying, it doesn't matter the size of the organization. What it changes how many visions we have in this project. The larger your organization, the more visions you need to concatenate and make work to each other. But as you said, these projects, what is the solution? Where is the end user before you crash? Because what I see most of is we push the project, we work the project, we do the technicals, we do all this, get to the end, give it to the end user to doesn't work, or they don't want to use it. And now you need to come as a company to force the use. It's never going to work.
It's so often it has nothing to do with whether or not it was a successful implementation. It has everything to do with, is it going to have a successful acceptance?
Correct.
And that's an entirely different, that's like 3 or 4 shows that we need to dig into. But this, I think, is a good example, as we've kind of round today's episode out, of the basic thinking that both of us do when we have somebody, and even our own, getting a project started, turning an idea into a project, that basic movement forward. And it's something that I think people really need to get outside help with. It's not an easy thing when you are looking at the project that you have to do to be able to figure out all the steps that you have to do. Having those outside eyes to help you and guide you through that process can be incredibly empowering, and it can allow you to ask the questions that you don't know to ask, or maybe unwilling to ask. So bringing that kind of resource forth, bringing an Augusto, bringing a me to the table and being able to work with that can make a huge difference just in getting any project started.
Yep. So this is a discussion that we will continue having on the next show and the next show. We want to really bring more than these are the 3 steps. What are the issues we're seeing? What is the experience that we have? What are the reality when the tire meet the roads of what happened with these things? That is not things you listeners don't know. Is in the heat of the day-to-day battle, you forgot. Okay. And sometimes it's much easier to blame the consultant. Okay. Hey, this guy think we need a solution for this. Okay. That's sometimes easier than said, I don't know why we're doing this project. Hey, sometimes you can ask it that way, but the consultant can. Okay?
Sure.
And it's very useful.
Sure. All right. Well, why don't you take us out then?
Well, with this, follow us where you like to listen to podcasts, like us or subscribe, and leave us a review. You can also interact with us in personalproductivity.club. We have a channel there. You can talk to us. You can send us message, and we can extend that. You can also go to Gelwood Tech, Productivity Voice, or Nosby.consulting, and you will find more of what we do. We are Augusto Pinat and Argel Wicks. See you next time from your favorite device.